How badly is the NBN hurting Optus and Telstra's bottom line?
And do we need budget NBN plans for low-income households?
Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Netcom, taking Australian technology to the global market. Welcome to Vertical Hold, Behind the Tech News, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined as always by Alex Kidman, a man who was born under such a bad sign that he almost couldn't join us this week after his house flooded and then his entire suburb lost power. Alex, are you there? Come in. Can you hear us over the noise of the rescue choppers?
Kids, get to the chopper!
What's going on over there, man?
A little bit of everything, but so far nothing has blown up today.
Okay, so 0 days since a blown up incident. Cool.
Exactly.
This week we're joined once again by ZDNet Australia Deputy Editor and the Queen of Telco, Corinne Reichert. Corinne, welcome back to the show and please forgive the mess in the Vertical Hold studios.
Thank you so much for having me again.
It's also a big welcome this week to our new podcast sponsor, Australian networking giant Netcom. It's great to have Netcom on board, and we always appreciate the support from our sponsors, and hopefully they can hook Alex up with emergency rations and a diesel generator to keep the show running. This week, we're talking subsidies for low-income Australians struggling to get on the NBN, plus the financial woes that Telstra and Optus are running into as part of the NBN rollout. But first, over to the tech news desk. Alex, what's happening in tech?
With less than a week to go before its reveal, just about everything about Samsung's upcoming Galaxy S10 handset appears to have leaked online already. There will be 3 models, starting with the Samsung Galaxy S10e, or possibly Galaxy S10 Lite, then the regular Galaxy S10 and the Galaxy S10 Plus. Now, as you'd expect, the Plus model has the biggest display, along with dual front-facing cameras, and it's expected that all 3 models will be available to buy from around the 8th of March 2019.
Fans of Windows 95 rejoice. You can now download a standalone version of Microsoft's long-dead operating system as an app. Written in JavaScript, the app runs on Windows 10, Mac, and Linux, so you can bring Windows 95 back to life on a modern machine. Of course, Windows 95 introduced us to the Start menu and the taskbar, plus the app comes with some classic software from back in the day, Microsoft Front Page, Netscape 2.0, and even gaming classics like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D.
Speaking of gaming, you're probably familiar with classic Russian puzzle game Tetris. But what happens when you combine block-matching action with the current fad for Battle Royale-style games? You get Tetris 99, announced this week by Nintendo for its Switch console. As the name suggests, it's a fight to the death between you and 98 other players where only one player and one horribly earworming theme tune can survive.
Netflix has ranked Telstra as Australia's fastest streaming provider for the 12th month in a row, coming in just ahead of Optus and Exitel. For the first time, Telstra's NBN and non-NBN customers have been ranked separately in Netflix's list. Telstra's NBN customers are ranked first in the country with an average streaming speed of 4.38 megabits per second, while Telstra's non-NBN customers lag at 4th place with 3.83 megabits per second. Now, the figures failed to break out NBN and non-NBN speeds for the other telcos like Optus and Exitel, which seems to give Telstra a bit of an advantage.
So Adam, Australians love Netflix, they love streaming Netflix, and Telstra's news seems to suggest that it's the place to be for Netflix. But your news report did not sound as though you were convinced.
Well, they are impressive figures until you go back and look at the graph and understand how the figures have actually changed this month. So Netflix puts out this list every month, and you can go to the Netflix stats website, break it down to Australia, look at the stats over the last year so you can see what I'm talking about. At the start of 2018, Telstra and Exitel were neck and neck ahead of Optus. And then in about May, Telstra jumped up and was ahead of the pack. Then Optus slowly started to claw that lead back. And in December 2018, Optus was only 0.02 megabits of a second behind Telstra. So Optus was on 4.05 megabits per second and Telstra was on 4.07. I mean, that's like almost a rounding error. We're talking south. So close. So you're thinking, okay, let's see what happens in January. Can Optus just sneak ahead? But this is the month that they go, hey, let's break out these figures for Telstra so Telstra can have its NBN customers one listing, which then jumps them much ahead of Optus because they're not held back. And then the non-NBN customers fall back into fourth place. This, to me, seems a little bit sus. The timing was just right to make sure that Telstra could put out a big press release on how it won this thing 12 months in a row, especially because in other countries where Netflix makes this breakdown, they do it for multiple ISPs. It's a bit suspicious, I think, to just do it for one ISP in Australia. If they're going to do it, they need to do it for everybody. Corinne, I don't know what your experiences are dealing with Netflix, but does it sound like we're comparing apples with apples here?
Not really. I mean, everyone has NBN services, so why aren't they breaking it down for all of the ISPs there? I mean, did Telstra just complain and therefore they got special treatment like they usually find a way to do? Who knows?
Well, this is what I'm looking into. I've been speaking to Optus and Telstra and Netflix as well, and I'm still waiting to hear back from them so that, it could be that this turns into a story on the Sydney Morning Herald next week and I've got some more information. But at this point in time, it really looks like that Netflix and Telstra have somehow got together and decided to offer this to Telstra, but not anybody else. Now, Alex, I know that you watch the speeds a lot and they're important for the plans. How big a deal was it for Telstra to be able to say we got 12 months in a row? And is it a bit dodgy that we may never know what they would have got in January?
Look, I think from a marketing perspective, it's huge because, as we said, people love Netflix. Telstra's contention, I think, is that an awful lot of the caching that they're doing is part of why they're kind of punching ahead.
True.
And I wonder what effect overall that actually has. But clearly, they've got certain deals in place with Netflix. The thing that really strikes me about those speeds, though, is that they are astonishingly low. When you're talking 4 meg, you're talking a standard definition Netflix stream. And if you're going to break out your NBN figures saying, hey, our Netflix NBN figures are 4 meg, then aren't you just kind of saying, well, actually, our average evening speed is 4 meg? Because that's not great.
Well, I was thinking
that's pretty awful.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, but Netflix's stats make it clear, or the fine print makes it clear that this is not just judging their total download speeds, it's judging their Netflix streaming. And when you look at other countries like the US, they're also coming in about 4 megabits per second. So I think what that means is, I guess, just the vast majority of people are still watching Netflix in standard or maybe high def. And so people like myself who are watching an Ultra HD, there's not enough of us to shift the dial. Because you're right, it does sound ridiculously low, but it's not this is what your connection can do. This is what people are watching. So maybe the difference comes down to when it's that close, maybe it's just how many Telstra customers are watching Ultra HD as opposed to how many Optus customers are watching Ultra HD.
Well, there statistically, of course, Telstra is almost at a disadvantage because we know that it's got such a large proportion of the Australian broadband market. It's actually got more numbers pushing its averages around, where a smaller player might actually be able to do slightly better just by having more of those Ultra HD customers out of its total percentage, not necessarily more than Telstra has, of course.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to maybe drop in like an Aussie broadband in there, which people tend to favour someone like an Aussie broadband because they want to spend more money and get the top dollar. They're more likely to have an Ultra HD TV. They might come out even further ahead. So, Corinne, you were talking to Telstra this week. What do they have to say?
Well, during financial results this morning, CEO Andy Penn was actually leaning on the Netflix numbers as part of the push for how well Telstra is doing, how well their network is doing, despite what the numbers show. And he was saying, we've won Netflix speeds 12 months in a row now. So maybe he did lean on Netflix a little to get that 12 months in a row metric.
So it's Telstra results week, and we've really seen a big impact of the NBN. I know we're talking a soup du jour again of the NBN, but I swear we've got a hot serve of Mobile World Congress news coming up over the next few weeks. But Corinne, today it's NBN again and Telstra. What does Telstra have to say at their finances?
So Telstra produced some pretty bad results today for the first half of the financial year. Revenue was down by 223 million. Profit dropped from 1.7 billion to 1.2 billion. EBITDA was down from 5.1 billion to 4.3 billion. So they're quite significant drops. $500 million is a lot of money. And Andy Penn and his team were saying it's due to very different circumstances thanks to the NBN. I mean, they used to rely a lot on their wholesale broadband revenues, and now that's all going to NBN. So they've blamed NBN entirely for their profit drop, and so did Optus, which today also announced its results. So Optus also announced a profit drop of $147 million. EBITDA decrease, revenue was up really, really slightly. But Optus also blamed NBN and the loss of NBN migration payments. So they're both blaming NBN and all their customers moving over to the NBN for their profit drops.
So I'm curious about those figures because we also got the ACCC Wholesale Market Indicators report this week as well. And that showed which of the ISPs have the majority of NBN customers. And in Telstra's case, it's got something like 49% of the market. It's way bigger than anyone else, and it's not even close. If they can't make money out of the NBN, I mean, what's going on there? I thought Telstra was meant to be on this whole, was it Telstra 2022 efficiency drive thing, and they've got most of the NBN market. But still, they can't make money.
So right now, on the Telstra 2022 strategy, they restructure costs hit them in this half, whereas they'll start to make that up in future. We'll see some more money made from that. On NBN, they've got 2.3 million NBN customers, which is definitely the majority. But the problem is that they're not making as much money on those customers as they were when they could sell their own network and wholesale their own network.
Did they give any indication of what kind of speed tiers those customers were going for? Because I saw figures going around that said, I think something like a quarter of all NBN users are on a 12 meg plan. And I would think because Telstra sort of seems to be more of your mums and dads kind of telco, that it would probably have greater than 25% on those entry level plans. So
that's probably true. I mean, they have a lot of older customers who have been with Telstra for a very long time who would have just been probably switched over to the lower speed tiers, which means they're not making a lot of money out of probably the majority of those customers. But Telstra didn't break it down by speed tier on the NBN. That's more the ACCC's thing. And they're not doing it across, breaking it down by telcos, which telco sells on which tiers the most, just what tiers are the most popular.
I guess if you're a Telstra, you are in that trend. I mean, you kind of mentioned the Telstra 22 to them cutting back. They are in this transitional phase because in the same half of the year, for the financial half year just finished, they also switched over to offering their air quotes unlimited plans. They depreciated the value of mobile data in a pretty significant way by doing so, and I think overall, that's probably a healthy move. It's not a bad thing for consumers, but it's probably a healthy thing for them in the long term. But, that presumes the share price doesn't collapse and the whole business doesn't go belly up.
Right. So average revenue per user did drop by almost $2 per month, and that's per user on their postpaid plans. So Telstra has 8 million postpaid users, and they've just all of them have dropped from an average of $57 per month to $55.50 per month. So that's already going to hit their bottom line because they've got more postpaid customers. They added almost 240,000 in the last half, but they're all paying slightly less and they're bundling in more and more, but the ARPU keeps dropping.
So if they've got 8 million, once you allow for people who don't have phones, that means they also must have around about coming up to half of the mobile market, the same as they got half of the NBN market. So they can't complain that they don't have enough customers.
Right. They do still have a very big market share and definitely the biggest in Australia across mobile and across NBN, definitely.
But they've got increasing pressure in probably more, I would argue, in the mobile market than in the NBN market, because the NBN pricing constructs mean that there's a certain similarity across a lot of plans in terms of pricing. You can only go so cheap if you're an NBN ISP, or you go bust, and we've actually seen quite a few of those recently going bust. But in the mobile market, there's so many MVNOs out there. There are competing networks, and and if I'm Telstra, I'm also waiting to see what happens with the whole TPG Vodafone merger as well.
Definitely. And I mean, Optus said in its results today that it's expanded its 4G network out to, 97% of the population now. So Optus is catching up Telstra can only rely on, having the best coverage for regional users for so long. The other telcos are going to be spending. And while TPG Vodafone is more metro focused, they are going to be a competitor for all of those metro customers, which is, of course, the majority of customers in Australia.
Yeah, and if you're on an MVNO, actually the odds are very good you're on Optus as it happens. And actually that's probably a good pivot point for them as well, because they were talking up, and we've talked about this in recent episodes, their 5G rollout and how that was, obviously a good sign for the future. But that's obviously not making them any money yet, is it?
No. So they announced it at the very end of January, the very last day of January, and they're going to launch it with $70 a month for unlimited data, but it's not going to be providing commercial services until, I think, the second half or the end of the first half. So it's going to be a while before they start seeing customers on this and start making money. People can sign up now for, the really initial rollout, and they've only launched 4 towers so far, 2 in Sydney, 2 in Canberra. So, I mean, that's really limited people. So while they do have a commercial service ready to go, they're not going to be making much money from it yet, and they might not launch it with, actual people until Telstra does as well. And Telstra has more than 200 towers switched on. They're just waiting for the mobile devices at this point. They're going to have a lot bigger coverage.
Well, I would presume we would hear something from Telstra on 5G basically end of next week, MWC time.
Yes.
I'd be very surprised if they left it a lot later than that, just in terms of having time to roll stuff out. I was kind of entertained by the fact that Optus put out a press release saying, we've launched another mobile tower in Sydney. Because it's like, well, great, you've now got 2 of them and nobody can access them. And come back to me when I can do something.
And it wasn't, Sydney CBD, it was Kellyville. So it wasn't an exciting announcement.
To be fair to Kellyville, I think it's actually okay for them to say, we're targeting things that aren't just CBD, though. To say, hey, we actually do want to have a bit of widespread coverage for this.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, how many Optus customers are there going to be in that one suburb of Sydney? Rather than launching, a series across the CBD, they'll be targeting millions of customers.
You would think so, and you would think Telstra would probably do the same. I can't help but wonder if Telstra is not going to do a history repeats itself. When they launched their 4G, they at first, admittedly, did, right, here's CBD. And then they didn't know, I might be getting my numbers slightly muddled over the years, but I think it was something like, here's 100 regional centres and we're clicking them on all today, go. So it wouldn't surprise me if Telstra did that with its 5G as well and just said, yeah, we don't do single towers.
Yeah. They've got more than 200 5G sites live now. They're in Canberra, Adelaide, Perth, Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, and then, the random regional centre of Toowoomba. So they do have a lot of sites already live in most of the capital city or all the capital cities. They're just waiting for the handsets now.
So that's going to put Optus behind in that 5G arms race, just like they've just sort of catching up. You said they've got, 97% of 4G coverage. Now we start that game again with 5G, and it looks like Telstra is always going to be able to be ahead of the game and say, well, they obviously won't say 5G wherever you need it because they learnt their lesson there, but they will be able to offer it in places where others can't.
Definitely. And I mean, Optus's 5G service at the moment is just fixed wireless as well. So it's just going to be when you're home, whereas Telstra is really emphasizing that it's a real 5G service, as in it's mobile. So as soon as you get the mobile phone, you'll be able to use it wherever you are. As long as there are towers live there, you don't have to be at home connected to your hotspot, which is what Optus's service right now is.
Although we say right now, all of this is subject to when they actually start taking actual money from consumers or from businesses. And there again, Optus might be able to jump up and say, right, we will actually be live with this. And those first Telstra phones will be 5G and you'll walk to the end of the block, and then they might not be because of that whole range issue.
Yeah, they'll drop back onto 4G.
So while the telcos are saying that they can't make money out of the NBN, there's another issue with NBN income, and it's to do with low-income earners and their access to NBN's services and their affordability. And this week, the Australian Communications Consumer Action Network, also known as ACAN, put out a call for what it's calling the No Australian Left Offline initiative. It's designed to make NBN more affordable for low-income households. Now, Corinne, I know you've been following this story. So what's their proposal?
So they want to bring down wholesale broadband, like a concession for low-income households. They want to bring down the wholesale pricing to $20 a month, which would then mean that eligible households would be paying about $30 a month, rather than 50 or 60, which is kind of the average now. So it would deliver 50 megabits per second, and it would be targeted at those who receive financial support from the federal government, pensioners, people with disabilities, struggling parents, Indigenous households, and those in regional areas. So ACAN is saying that the bottom 10% of households in Australia spend 10% of their disposable income on telecommunications, and it's getting to the point where it's completely unaffordable. So they want NBN to bring down its prices or the government to subsidize it so that they can actually afford it, because by comparison, the average Australian household spends only 3.5% of their disposable income on communications. And it's just this big barrier. I mean, NBN is designed to bridge the digital divide, but what happens when those on the other side of the divide can't actually afford the NBN?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's that classic poverty trap thing, I think, where when you're on an extremely low income, everything costs more as a percentage of your overall income. Every decision you make is tricky and difficult. I find the 50 meg figure an interesting one, because I could see an argument against it. I'm certainly not making it. Well, why can't they make do with 12 meg?
Right, or 25.
With my
50 is a lot.
Yeah, with my heavily conservative hat on.
50 is the second highest speed tier.
I don't agree with that. I can see, I can see the genuine benefits in those households, because you're not necessarily just talking one person. You're talking about sharing that. And of course, with all of these speed tiers, they're always up to.
Right.
Sorry,
and if they're targeting, regional and Indigenous households, a lot of them, they need the speeds and the access and the capacity a lot more than Metro customers do, because they don't have anything at the moment and they need it to access, telehealth, telemedicine, education, business. If they're out in regional areas, they need that capacity to actually live like everyone else does in metro areas.
Well, there's an awful lot of government services which are, either online only or heavily pushed online these days for affordability reasons. And if you can't access those, you've got some genuine problems. And now we discussed this, in fact, I think it was last week on the show. This proposed write down of the value of the NBN, which should, in theory, drop plan prices. Do you think there might be a convergence point between those kind of two areas? Because if you're talking a government subsidy, that's going to have a cost. If you're talking a write down, that's going to have a cost too.
Right. So the problem is that by bringing down the wholesale pricing of the NBN or subsidizing it, NBN itself is not going to be making any money, which means that no one is going to want to acquire the company in future because it's not going to be cash flow positive. I mean, as it is, it's not meant to be cash flow positive until about, 2022? And even then, it's only going to be marginal. So bringing the wholesale pricing down any further is going to make NBN unattractive to buy for an actual company.
More unattractive.
More unattractive, even more unattractive to buy. So the government might actually have to take it.
So is ACAN's proposal, though, that NBN Co should be the one providing the subsidy, or are they looking at it as a government subsidy or even at an ISP level? Where is ACAN proposing the money?
So ACAN is proposing that it comes from the government as a concession to lower income households. The way that they already help provide financial support for a lot of these households anyway, they're saying that NBN should be included in that. So they would subsidize it to the tune of, $20 a month instead of these people paying $60 a month.
Well, that just about wraps up yet another episode of Vertical Hold. As always, we love to get your feedback on the show, so feel free to comment via Twitter or the Vertical Hold Facebook page. Thanks again for Corinne for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks everyone for listening. We're on a big push this year to reach more people, so it really helps if you can jump on iTunes, Spotify, your podcasting platform of choice, leave us a review, share it with your friends, put the good word out there. Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Netcom, taking Australian technology to the global market.
This week, the Australian Communications...
Do you want me to
I got woken up by my power coming on at 4 a.m. this morning after the blackout.